Hello everyone, my name's Tom and I'm back for another video on Formula 1 Fantasy. This time we're going to be doing 2022 season, releasing this exactly 1 week before the first race in Bahrain. We obviously have up until the qualifying session to pick our teams, so I'm hoping that this video is going to help you to pick your teams. I'm going to give you my opinion on who I think are the best teams to target, who are the best drivers, who's overpriced, who's underpriced. You obviously want to target who you think you're going to squeeze the value out of, who's underpriced in this game, who's cost too much, and just to avoid them, that sort of thing. So based mainly on the testing and what the teams have been saying, what the drivers have been saying, what the journalists, TV journalists and that have been saying, I've kind of gathered my own opinions on what's going on, looking at the times that cars have been setting, that sort of thing, and just trying to take everything into account and then picking the best fantasy team to give you the best sort of all-round start to the season. Yeah, so let's get into it. I'm going to start with talking about Ferrari quickly because, as you can see by my teams on your screen, there's a lot of red in the teams. That's because Ferrari, they're looking strong. They're looking strong. Everyone's talking them up at the moment, and maybe they're overhyping because everyone's kind of excited about Ferrari becoming a major force again, as they've been kind of a bit rubbish the last few years, although they did well last season, obviously. But they're looking strong this year. They're doing, like, reliability wise, they've had literally no issues in testing. They're looking fast. The drivers are positive. Last season, Ferrari used some of their engine upgrades in 2021 to focus on the development of this current car. So taking that into account, they've obviously had a bit more development on this new car. So yeah, Ferrari definitely looking strong this season, and they're also kind of underpriced, I think, based on that. Obviously, if we think they're going to be one of the best possibly title contending teams, their constructors are only 25 million. You compare that to Red Bull, who are 32.5, and Mercedes, who I can't remember off the top of my head, I think it's like 34 million or something, even more expensive. So Ferrari at 25 million is a really good, sort of fairly safe, but also like good value pick for our constructors, which is why in this Team 1, you can see I've gone for Ferrari. I've also doubled up on their drivers, because again, I think they're underpriced. Sainz, if you're only going to go for one Ferrari driver, I'd pick Sainz, because he's $1 million cheaper, and I think he's as good, if not even better, than Leclerc. To take nothing away from Leclerc, because I think he's a very good driver as well, but I think Sainz is, if you're only picking one, he's the one to go for. Although, as you can see in all three of these builds, I've gone for double up on the Ferraris, but that's because I'm all aboard the hype train of Ferrari. Yeah, so that's Ferrari for you. In fact, one last thing on Ferrari, actually, Leclerc himself said it was the smoothest pre-season testing he's ever experienced. That's quite a big thing to say. Yeah, no reliability issues, looking fast, looking undervalued. My advice straight away, target Ferrari. Looking at Red Bull, the constructors are quite dear, 32.5, but it's better to get the constructors than it is to get like Perez plus Verstappen, because Perez plus Verstappen will cost you nearly half your entire budget, whereas Red Bull are about a third of your budget. So if you want to go for Red Bull, I'd probably want to go for the constructors rather than anyone like Max Verstappen, because Perez will, although he's not going to be as good as Max, he's like almost half the price of Max Verstappen. So, you know, if you want to go for a driver, then Perez is actually, as you can see, I didn't even realise, but Perez is in actually all three of my my teams. So yeah, maybe there is something to be said about Perez being such a cheap price for a title contending car. And obviously he probably won't get as many points as Max, because Max will get the extra points for beating his teammate and out qualifying his teammate, and in general Max is going to be doing that over Perez. But for almost half the price of what Max costs, then you can't really go wrong with Perez. And you can also put the turbo driver on him, which doubles the points. So yeah, Perez is a really good shout. Red Bull also looking really strong. A little quote from Mr. Horner himself, who's the team principal. Perez seems to be happy with the characteristics of the car, and his lap time at this time of day looks reasonable. This was talking about what's going on during the Bahrain testing. He goes on to say, it seems to be behaving as we hoped for. Every time Ferrari is on track, it looks competitive. Another tick in the box of Ferrari. Mercedes haven't shown their hand yet. The car looks a handful to drive. In general, I would say the team principals and that are pretty honest about what they have to say about the teams and that. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting quote from Horner there. So as you can see from my team 2, you can create a team with like doubling up on Red Bull. Like I said already, if you're doubling up on Red Bull, I wouldn't go for Max Verstappen because he's just so expensive. You're going to get most of Max's points just by having him at Red Bull as a constructor anyway. So Red Bull plus Perez is a good way to double up on them. Then you've also got the double Ferrari in this team as well. I really like this team too, and I think I might be going for this build out of everything. Yeah, the only difference between like Team 2 and Team 3 here is the constructors have switched from Ferrari to Red Bull, and then Tsunoda has become Gasly here. I generally think that Tsunoda might be a really good pick this season. Gasly obviously is such a strong driver, and he's probably still slightly underpriced at 13.5, but a 5 million saving gets you Tsunoda, and Tsunoda's looking really strong towards the end of last season. AlphaTauri look like they have a strong car, nothing spectacular, but they look like a solid, like reliable midfield car that will just accumulate several points every race. And yeah, at 8.5 million, I think Tsunoda's probably the best of the mid to low price drivers. Speaking of mid to low price, well, not mid, but speaking of low price drivers, another person you can see as a recurring theme in here is Kevin Magnussen. So Kevin Magnussen, back in Hascar, looking like he could be the best pick basically for saving you money to spend elsewhere on your team. Let's have a look at a couple of quotes from Haas drivers themselves. So Kevin's come back in. He said there's lots of smiles around the team. I feel like the team is going to a good place. And then Pietro Fittipaldi, another Haas driver, says we have a very good car. You never want to read so much into testing, but we do have a very good car. It's looking good. There's lots of positivity around Haas at the moment. And at 5.5 million, like an experienced F1 driver coming back into a team that he's already worked for, could be the massive bargain. Like, Haas could well be a proper midfield team this year, not an embarrassment at the back with Mazepin. Bloody so glad Mazepin's out the lineup, and Magnussen coming in at the same price as what Mazepin was originally priced at is potentially a huge bargain. It's hard to say if he's going to be better or worse than Schumacher, but there's no point in spending the extra million on Schumacher when Magnussen is the cheapest driver in the game, and he just enables you to pack out the rest of your team. I think it's a no-brainer to go for Magnussen. Moving on, Mercedes. So Mercedes are looking hard. It's hard to know. They're talking themselves down a lot, and they're talking up their rivals a lot. Are they sandbagging? Are they actually genuinely struggling? So George Russell himself says that the performance isn't there, and we're a step behind our rivals. Lewis is talking about not being able to compete for wins. There's a lot of negativity going on at Mercedes, which is, don't know, it's really hard to read into. They haven't set the timings alight in the testing. There's lots to talk about their new side pods or lack of side pods. So is this extreme design going to make them go really fast, or is it actually just a load of rubbish and they're going to come into Bahrain next week with a different car altogether? It's really, really hard to predict where Mercedes are at the moment. And also the prices of their drivers, 24 million for Russell, and I think it's, I honestly can't remember. Let's have a quick look. If we go into Team 1 here, we can edit it and then we can find out exactly how much Lewis Hamilton costs. We get rid of Norris. Lewis, yeah, 31 million. It is so expensive. Russell and Lewis, really, really expensive. And we don't know enough about what Mercedes are going to bring to the table next week. So my advice would be avoid. We know a lot more about what's going on with Red Bull and Ferrari. We can say with quite a lot of confidence that Red Bull and Ferrari are going to be strong. We really don't know what's going to happen with Mercedes. They could come away and blow away the opposition and come first and second on the podium. George for his first ever win. Who knows? But there's too much unknown and unpredictability. And in Formula One fantasy, you want to be able to predict as much as you can and be safe, but also aggressive in your picks. And I think by avoiding Mercedes, targeting Red Bull and Ferrari, I think it's the safest and most aggressive way you can go about the start of the season. What else have we got to talk about? Okay, so moving on to McLaren. McLaren were a very strong team last year, a bit up and down. Ricciardo had a lot of downs and a couple of good ups, like obviously the Monza win and everything. So I think Ricciardo is quite possibly underpriced this year. He's 14.5 million as opposed to Norris, who's been boosted right up to 16 million. I do like Norris as a pick, especially starting off in the season. He's a reliable driver, he's consistent. McLaren look really strong. However, they have got some brake issues at the moment, which they don't seem to be able to sort out. Here's a quote from Lando himself: "Yeah, not great, but we're still getting through it as best we can, but we aren't making as much progress as we wanted." Obviously, Danny Ricciardo as well has been tested positive for COVID, so he's not going to be feeling well at the moment. He hasn't had any testing in Bahrain. He's going to be coming into the season cold, so maybe not a pick from the start of the season necessarily, but looking further down the line, I think Danny Ricciardo at 14.5 million, who is also likely to lose value potentially if he doesn't get off to a good start. He could be a really good cheap enabler for the rest of the season if you pick him up. I don't want to start with him though, because like I say, he's currently got COVID as of the time of this. He's going to come out of isolation and then go straight into like a Grand Prix weekend. That's a lot to ask for. COVID is an absolute bastard. It's a horrible disease, basically. You don't want to get it, and it's going to knock you for 6. And is he going to recover in time enough? Is he going to want to be driving a Grand Prix? Is he going to be fit enough to do it? I don't know. There's lots of question marks. So personally, I would avoid Ricciardo to start the season, but definitely keep an eye on him. He could be a really good enabler at 14.5 million. McLaren themselves, again, a bit unknown overall. They're looking quick, but reliability issues. So that's why I've only got like Norris in Team 1 here, and they don't feature anywhere else. As a constructor, they're like 18.5 million, so they're really cheap compared to the likes of Red Bull, Mercedes, and quite a significant drop on the price of Ferrari. But again, too much unknown for my liking. The COVID situation with Danny, it's all a bit suspect. So again, I would probably avoid McLaren as much as I could for the time. So I think that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on everything. I haven't mentioned the other teams actually. Let's just quickly go over them. There's a strong reason why I haven't really mentioned the other teams. So the likes of Alfa Romeo and Williams and Aston Martin, they all look a little bit naff. I'll be completely honest. They just don't look super strong. They're not impressed greatly in testing. They've had some reliability issues. The Aston Martin in particular looks a bit clunky going around the corners, and then also the price range is a bit weird for like Aston Martin drivers. Like Vettel and Stroll around the 10-11 million mark. It's just a bit awkward when you're trying to like wedge in as much of the good drivers as you can, because the main points in this game are going to come from who finishes first, second, third. You're not going to get a lot of points for drivers that come in like 8th and 9th and 10th. You want those drivers to be your value picks, the likes of Tsunoda and possibly Magnussen this season, or Schumacher. You don't want to be spending chunks of money on someone that's going to finish like 10th, like Vettel, who, you know, who knows, Aston Martin might come strong all of a sudden. But in general, like Williams and Aston Martin, that completely disinterest me in terms of Formula 1 fantasy. That doesn't mean you shouldn't go for them if you want to. Like, this is just purely my opinion and what I think about things. But I'm guessing if you're watching this video, you're looking for exactly that. You want to get someone else's thoughts on things, and that's my opinion. I'd just steer clear. Focus on who you think is going to be really strong, who the value picks are, who's overpriced. Avoid them. So in my opinion, overpriced right now, Mercedes, too much unknown about them. Who are the value picks? Ferrari look super good. Red Bull look super good. Honestly, out of all three of these teams, I'm leaning towards Team 2, because Red Bull means you scoop up quite a lot, the majority of Max's points. You obviously get doubled up on Perez's points. You can turbo drive a Perez if you want. You've got both the Ferrari boys in there. You've got Tsunoda, who is my tip for bargain of the season potentially, and then Magnussen as well, also potentially bargain of the season. So I'm really leaning towards Team 2, but feel free to dabble about and play around with the likes of Norris and Gasly, because Gasly's obviously a really strong driver. There's lots of ways you can tweak the team and build the team differently, but I think I'm going to go for Team 2. But we'll see what the next week brings. Maybe we'll get some more information about different things, but yeah, just keep your eyes peeled for any more news and stuff. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more of this sort of content. If you're already interested in fantasy Formula 1, then let me know, and maybe I'll do some more videos. But I'm not going to do too many videos if the support isn't there to do it. I'm not just going to talk into the void in the hope that like 10 people watch my video. So yeah, please subscribe, and thanks very much for listening, and I hope you do well this season. And yeah, thanks very much, and see you later.